Thank you, Marilyn Rappa. And Chairman Noble.
Here.
Thank you.
And now we will proceed to number 3, approval of the minutes from October 2nd, 2017 meeting. Did anybody notice anything wrong with that? I looked through them. They looked fine to me.
Second.
Take a vote on the approval of the minutes.
Okay. Commissioner Hearn? Yes. Commissioner Belaski?
Yes.
Commissioner Rappa?
Yes.
Commissioner Clyett?
Yes.
Commissioner Wyckoff?
Yes.
And Chairman Noble.
Yes. Okay, on to number 4 on the agenda, new business. A, to consider a special exemption use for property located at 325 140th Avenue East. The applicant is seeking to construct a new cabana on this property. The property is zoned RM-R2, low-density multifamily residential, and has a zoning designation of RM, residential medium. Does the city have
A presentation, very good question. We're having a little bit of trouble finding everything here, but we can go ahead because you have in your packet a complete description of what's being proposed here. The property owner has a large full-size lot and then also a secondary lot that's actually a full-size lot next to it, a 60-foot wide lot. And on that secondary lot has constructed a garden. And in the middle of the garden has placed a cabana. Initially, they had planned to install this as a gazebo, just kind of as an accessory use. However, it's larger. The one that they want is larger than a gazebo would be allowed to be. Any accessory use is limited in its size to 8 by 10 by 8. And this is larger than that. However, cabanas are allowed as a standalone use by special exception in the district. And so whenever they have an opportunity to do something that's not inconsistent with the comprehensive plan and the nature of the neighborhood, they can ask for a special exception to allow for cabanas. The difference between a cabana and a gazebo is that a cabana is meant for use as somewhat like a bathhouse, so that this does have water run to it, and it has a curtain devices so that it can be closed off and used for a bathhouse, but their primary purpose is as a garden accessory and a place to sit in the shade. There are no conflicts with the area in terms of design. There's no design criteria listed for special exception. It is just required that you review it, and then again that the special magistrate reviews it also to make sure that it is consistent with code. As I said, we don't have a list of criteria for what constitutes an approved special exception. So it's kind of a case-by-case basis.
So we have some new members here, so we will be voting on approval to send it to the magistrate.
Correct.
Yes.
You are advisory in this capacity since you're making no final.
Okay.
Yes, I had hoped to be able to put the plan up, but it's not getting me to the right place here. Oh, I might be able to find it. Yes.
Sorry, important to point out, I don't know if you did already, that this is on a separate lot
Yes, it is.
from the house. It's on its own individual lot.
There it is.
Okay.
There you go.
Mr. Chairman, may I speak? When will the applicant go before, so if we approve this, I was just looking at the timetable for the applicant, when will the next opportunity be for the applicant to go to the magistrate?
The magistrate has a meeting coming up on the 22nd, so if I get approval today, then I can go ahead and put the packet together quickly. We had anticipated that, so typically they would have to have already applied, but I've already held the spot on the agenda in case you do give it approval. Either way, it's actually scheduled to go to them, either with your recommendation of approval or denial.
I have a question. Yeah. My question is, on 140th, I read this and it said that there was no blockage of view. The garden has view going through. It's very dense in there.
One thing that should be considered is this is a standalone lot. It could have a house on it. And from a staff perspective, my thought was that the garden, you can always have garden all over your lawn if you want, but that the cabana was smaller than a house would be. If the people across the street were looking at a house instead of the cabana, they'd still be blocked. So it's not making any more of an impact. It's not any more obstructive within the neighborhood than a house would be.
I've got a question for you. Does this have any impact, positive or negative, on the city's overall flood zone rating?
No, it's just an accessory. This is not a structure that could be insured. Anything that's built on the ground as an accessory has to meet all the building codes and standards, so it has to be anchored properly to ensure that in the case of wave, yes, the wind loads and any wave action in a high water situation, it would not become mobile. Can't be buoyant, right?
The existing fence that's on the house that goes along the side, is that going to be extended down to the water?
Any fencing on the property would have to be consistent with the setbacks in the code. They would not be able to extend down to the water except by the, consistent with the setbacks.
We're not considering that.
We aren't discussing the fence here, no. They would still have to go through separate permitting for any changes to a fence.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? Do we now open it up to public
Yes.
comments? Anybody from the public would like to comment? Please come up and state your name and address for the record. And I think we keep it to 3 minutes still.
Yes. And because the clock is covered, I'm just going to use my phone.
That's fine. Robert Preston, 425 South Bay Shore. I'm just 4 houses away from this gentleman. He has put in a wonderful, beautiful home. He has put in a garden that's quite an asset to the city. And I absolutely see no problem with him building this structure there. I mean, the whole thing is an asset to the city, period. And if more people bought an extra lot and put a garden on it, this place would be really beauty, but most people can't afford that. So I am strongly in favor of you sending it to the magistrate with an approval of yours so that he can do this. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir.
My name's Nick Babbage. I'm his neighbor right to the west of him. And a little bit of history. I've owned my lot for about 8 years. Prior to him putting a beautiful garden on there, which will help with water runoff because it'll absorb a lot, there was an empty, vacant lot that had the spoils from the canal on it, and it was an eyesore. And he's taken a lot of money and made a really beautiful structure, an item that is a credit to this community. And also, where that structure is located, it doesn't affect anybody's view. It's way more than the setback of 25 feet off the water. And that's all I have to say, and I have no problem with it. I'd be the most affected by it. And I thank God every day because this guy built this next to me. It really is nice. It's just something nice to look at. Okay? Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Anybody else like to speak? Then we will close the portion of the community speaking And I believe we could go, if someone wants to make a motion, or do we have to have more discussion? Are we ready for a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the request for the special exception use to construct the cabana on the property.
Can we take a vote then, please, Gwen?
Yes. Commissioner Bolasky,
Yes.
Commissioner Wykoff,
Yes.
Commissioner Rappa,
Yes.
Commissioner Hearn,
Yes.
Commissioner Clyett,
Yes.
and I'm sorry, Chairman Noble.
Yes. Congratulations, thank you. Okay, under new business, number 4B, Code of Ordinances. This is the juicy, fun stuff. Start out the new year on game night.
Very tip of it. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Here we are requesting a text change to Code of Ordinances, Land Development Regulations, Division 3, Walls, Fences, Hedges, and Sand Fences, Section 110-447, Rear Yards Facing Water. I don't know if everybody, I read through it. Does anybody have any questions for the city?
I would like to go on record with a presentation.
Sure, that'd be fantastic.
All right, the city has, the staff has for 30 years been interpreting the rear yard setback for fences to be the same as the building setback. So that if we called for the fence to drop in height in the rear yard, they would cause them to drop in height at the building setback, not at the house. So because our houses are of varying size throughout the community, some houses go all the way back to the setback, and they're 30 feet from the wall, for instance, or 25 feet from their wall. Or they may be much smaller houses that don't reach that far into the yard. But we've always required in the past that where you drop the fence height from 6 feet to 4 feet or 3 feet, that it be done at the building setback at that 30-foot or that 25-foot mark. And so almost everybody in town has their fences in that configuration. Within this last year, there was an objection to a fence that was erected because they had gone to a new fence, had taken down a chain link, and were putting up a 6-foot privacy fence and then dropping to a 4-foot picket fence. They came in and got permit for that and installed it the way everybody else has installed it. Staff had told them that this is the way it's always done. Well, unbeknownst, or the staff unaware, over the years at some point between this original ordinance being implemented in 1983 and the current version of the definitions, some of which were amended only within the last year, but all of which were amended since 2010. A new definition for rear yard was put in place. And that rear yard was now going to be defined as starting at the back of the house. Now, technically, the rear yard pretty much is always seen that way, but as you can see by the text that we've put into your packets, that's really important in rear yards backing up to Boca Ciega Bay because we do require the fence height to drop in the rear yard. It says that in rear yard facing Boca Ciega, the fence shall do the following. And as I said, they had always interpreted that rear yard as starting with the building setback, but the definition actually states that the rear yard, oops, let me see if I can find that for you. Oh, it's this little one. Yard. Rear means an open, unoccupied space extending across the full width of the lot and measured between the rear lot line and the rear building line of the main building. So an objection was filed that someone had put their fence up and dropped at the setback instead of the back of the building, even with the back of the building. The city manager sent this text to the city attorney, who interpreted to read exactly like it does, that the rear yard has to be defined as the back of the building. So that meant that hundreds of lots were now non-conforming throughout the city for their fence heights. And where an objection was filed, the property owners were told that they had to take the fence, one panel of their fence down in order to drop at a different location. I'm going to show you some graphics to give you an idea what this does. Here, I know you got a lot of glare up there, but we have houses of various sizes all along the street here with the Boca Ciega Bay in the back. The red lines represent a 6-foot privacy fence, and the hashed lines represent a 4-foot picket fence or a 3-foot solid fence. And you could see that some houses are allowed to have a privacy fence all the way to setback because that's how big they are. They go all the way to the setback. Smaller houses, those who have not been able to afford bigger houses or have not yet redeveloped, may be further back from Boca Ciega, and so they are only allowed to have a privacy fence to this corner, even with their home. Now, sometimes I know that a lot of people actually share fences. The neighbors will decide somebody's going to put up a fence and they split the cost or something. And as the conflict that is created here is if it's put on this side of the property line, the 6-foot privacy can go to here. If they decided to put it on this side of the line, then it can only go to here. And it creates an inequity. What it does is it means that people who can afford smaller houses have less privacy in their backyard. It's not exactly the type of equality that we're looking for. Now, most of these are put in that, and it gets more complicated because technically, because you can build all the way to this line, somebody can build a 35-foot tall house up to this line, but they can't put a 6-foot privacy fence there. Or you can put a shed there, because a shed as an accessory only has to meet the same setback as the house. Actually, you can put the shed all the way into the backyard and all the way back, not all the way to the wall, but you can put the shed back in the backyard even. So it doesn't make much sense. It creates kind of an unnecessary rule in the code. If you've got, we're unnecessarily restricting signage because it has even less of an impact than other things we do allow at that height. Also, other inconsistencies of effectively privilege for those who have built further back or have larger houses, or different style of house. For instance, these both have the same setback, but this one has an open patio or a shed over top of a patio. And the shed roof's not necessarily part of the original structure, so it wouldn't be counted as part of the setback, so their fence would have to be here. But this house, whose porch is part of the original roof, can have their fence all the way to here. So it's just very complex. It creates an inequity from one yard to the other. Now, some argument is always made that the purpose in dropping a fence along the water is that you're creating kind of an open space sense. You want a bit of a rhythm and not too much clutter in the back. However, all that's been requested of you here is that you recommend approval for the 6-foot fence to be the same for everyone. It's really not getting any closer than 30 or 25 feet to the water anyway. And because it can already be there for some lots, it's not really preserving any uniform open space sense throughout the community. Also, it would give us the opportunity to eliminate hundreds of nonconformities. Since this determination, people have been coming in and requesting that they replace their fences following the storm, and we've had to tell them that you can replace the fence, but now you have to drop your privacy further back, and they've just been deciding to leave their dilapidated fences up. So it's not encouraging the upkeep of the fences because they're afraid of losing any portion of the privacy that they've always had. And again, it just creates a lot of nonconformities. So staff is recommending that we amend the ordinance text as is presented to you There's a couple other issues I should address. You'll see that we've handed out an additional change today. I added some additional language. There's two other issues that occur. One is that because of the setback requirement, sometimes we have houses sitting immediately adjacent to a non-residential use. For instance, there's a house that sits up right next to the Elks parking lot, and we didn't really want them dropping their fence down to 4 feet at a picket because the parking lot goes all the way to the edge of the property, and she's got headlights right into the back of her house. That's not something we would ever have approved now. But we have those situations in an old city, so you have to have some means of allowing people to protect themselves. We also have a situation where somebody's asking for a higher fence in a lot that's immediately adjacent to the county park parking lot, and they've had people climbing over their 4-foot fence and going through their yards and over the dunes. They're tearing up the seagrass and everything. So that's something we were going to ask variance for, but realistically, we should have a means of protecting that just automatically in the code. Finally, another thing that's happened here is that we have a lot of mixed with commercial uses, and the rear yard definition is actually restricting commercial use as well. We really do want people to be able to fence off their property when they leave at night if they have commercial endeavors. They don't want strangers getting onto their boats or using their equipment. And right now, all the businesses have 6-foot fence because it was assumed that they were allowed to, or they've just put it up on their own. But the fact is they're actually not legal at the moment. So that's another nonconformity that could be resolved if we change the language. And I had given you some extra language to address that today. So the staff recommends approval of the text amendment as presented to address all 3 of those issues. And we're glad to answer any questions.
So my first question is, if you're just summarizing it to the one back, the fence now can go past the house to the setback.
Yes.
So the little houses, that red line would, the second one in,
Right.
they would be able to go all the way to the setback.
Correct. They'd all have even,
And shouldn't the fence be on the lot line?
no, well, if 2 people can have separate fences,
It's an infinite line.
yeah,
Small line, so it's
Yeah.
always going to encroach one side or another.
yeah.
Ideally, I
It just
guess.
depends on who pulls the permit as to who's granted the permission.
Right, right. And usually, I know I've had fences in my yards, my many yards over the years, and usually it's either one person's fence or another because it's either on one side of the lot line or another.
Yeah, if you put up the fence, you have the 4x4s on your side.
Your side, that's
Yeah, they
right.
get the pretty side, yes. Because we had actually one of the other planning commissioners that has resigned, they had a fence that was up before they bought their house. And it was more in their yard than the neighbor's yard. And she went to redo it, and the neighbor sued her because he'd been using that land. So that's why, this
Yeah,
is.
it's problematic. My last house was the same thing. They had built their shed on our land because the fence was on our property line. They built right up against it.
It's like a 20-year.
Creates problems when you're trying to get title and for sales of property sometimes. Mhm.
All right, any other questions?
I know that there are people.
I'm not sure if I'm
comment.
grasping the whole scope of what we're trying to do. So I'm not sure I saw the language in there that addresses the commercial property directly, or is that
We
something
handed
you're
out-
That's in
recommending
this
later?
red and green sheet, if you've got that.
Wonder why I missed that, okay.
Do you want to
So-
put that up on the screen, Linda? You don't have that one on the screen for the public?
Oh, there's right, yeah, boldface red, the one I missed,
Something
yeah,
for the
now I see.
public.
Right.
They just put that on.
There it is, yeah, that's it. That's the
Okay.
proposed language.
Got it. Is there any provision for when where you have a residential use that's not commercial, but a multifamily condominium, townhome complex or something next to a single-family residential? Is there a plan for a provision, or does this cover that as well, do you feel? Because sometimes you got you
Right.
want a bigger fence between those 2 different uses.
That's true.
We would have to add multifamily in here.
Right, we could add the term multifamily next to commercial and institutional.
I'm not trying to muddy the waters, I just.
Yeah, no, that's a good
I'm thinking,
point.
some of our spot infill now is going
Right.
from, where it's zoned for townhomes maybe, and you're gonna put up, it's a higher density use, and there's existing single family surrounding it, and now you're putting up a 10 or 15 unit building. Would they be permitted, would it be beneficial to have a larger fence surrounding that property that goes further out?
Possibly. You wouldn't want to assume that because you don't want to require 6-foot fences going up all over town.
Right.
But interior lots can all have a 6-foot fence all the way around
Oh, that's true.
anyway.
Yeah, this is
It's just
strictly
the ones
related to
on the
waterfront. Okay.
waterfront.
All right,
Yes.
thank you.
And I believe, Mr. Attorney, that we can add that language in our motion. Is that correct?
Yeah, what you're doing is a legislative act when you're amending the code, and legislative acts will be upheld as long as there are any rational basis for them. So as long as you're articulating your reasons for any suggestions, then that would be upheld.
And I did leave the language in here. You'll see it says they may be allowed or required in a site plan review process. So it may be determined in the site plan that they're not required in every case. So it's not an automatic, so I don't see any problem with adding in multifamily there.
Good job. All right. Is that it for the city?
Yes.
Thank you, Linda. Do we have anybody from the community that would like to speak?
I'll be reading. My name's Steve Chocchio. I live in Crystal Beach, Madeira Beach, my wife and I. And I'm here regarding the fence ordinance that the zoning director recommended for the amendment. It's obvious that the provisions must be made for changing this amendment as conditions do change and need conditions to arise or become out of date. It's unfortunate that the property owners with smaller and older homes are treated unfairly as opposed to newer homes which can be erected, as Linda said, 30 feet or higher. I'm the one that put up the 6-foot privacy fence with the 30-foot setback, and 5.5 feet was over that, which borders my house. So if I take that down, I think it's be more appealing to keep my privacy fence up than putting up a, 7 or 8 foot shed or a bunch of trees along that line, which we're allowed to do. And it's more appealing to keep the privacy fence up. And so therefore, I think I should be able to keep my fence up. It was already, approved by the city. And that's all I have to say. But short. But thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
My name's Charles Lambert. I live at 565 Crystal Drive. I am a neighbor of Steve and Sharon. And I'd just like to comment that Steve and Sharon, when they built that fence, they did due diligence. They weren't trying to hide anything. They had gotten all the permits necessary. They got the survey. They consulted us as they did the other neighbor. And one of the neighbors didn't like it. But he built it 30 feet back, which everybody thought was what the laws were regarding that. I think today everybody still thinks that. And that's what they're building fences to, but we have one person that has taken exception to that. But the fence is a very nice fence. I think he did it right. He did it correct. It was approved by the city. So even the city zoning thought it was an acceptable fence and to code. And with all that being said, I think it'd be a distraction if Steve was to have to take that section down and build it lower. We were very happy, with both the fence as we are with our neighbors. They're very conscientious neighbors. They believe in doing it right. I wished everybody kept their house up as nice as they do. And I think this is just a distraction. And the unfortunate part is I think Steve and Sharon not living here full time, they have to take time off to address all these issues caused by one person. And again, this is a one-person issue. We've not had this issue, before you guys ever. So it's one person. We've got hundreds of these fences out there that are non-conforming. And if we say Steve's is non-conforming, then we better address all the 100 other ones that are out there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else like to speak? Well, then we could open it up to discussion amongst the commission. Any questions or comments?
I'm sorry, what has, he has been
Well,
told
yes.
to take the fence down?
Yes. This is not under your review tonight, however, that's
Oh.
always been addressed. That was something that went to the magistrate,
Oh.
and we addressed that separately. All that you have before you is to discuss the fence.
see.
But yes, as I said earlier, there was a code enforcement complaint made that we had been interpreting it incorrectly, and we were forced to act on that legally. So would like not to do that on everybody else in town. But it was what drew our attention to the inconsistencies.
Okay.
But
They
this,
were
if
created.
this passes, this would solve their problem.
Yes.
They would be
Yes,
in
it
conform,
would.
right, okay.
Exactly.
That
That's
was
what I
my
was,
question.
and he would go, the magistratus meeting, he would hear this situation
The
too.
magistrate, yes, when we
As you
go
just
to the
said.
magistrate, I notify them that I'm advising we not act on it for an extended period of time because we're in the process of review of the code.
Okay,
And as he was implying there, the option was to take the 5.5-foot worth of fence down and then put up an 8-foot tall shed in the same place, or to plant really tall trees, or build a cabana. But it doesn't really accomplish anything.
We
Agreed.
also have these cases where the house is like an L, where there's a pool in one area, so the building stuck out further on one property line, and the fence could go further here, but then it was set back here because of the pool, it had to be back here further on that side. That's what happened in that particular case.
So we've,
Not everyone builds out to their setback line, but we think what's intended is the setback.
Right, you don't have to build out to the 30 feet, but you have the
Yeah.
option now. You could still keep it lower if you're friendly with the neighbors or something, or you just
Is it-
always kept it. This isn't going to open a big can of worms for code compliance. This is going to solve problems for them.
yeah, put
Right,
the lid
it's-
back on.
Gives it some clarity.
And what we've been hearing really is that people instead were going to put sheds up, which they can, because the shed can go all the way to the setback line on the bay. And, they may decide they want the storage space anyway, but
Well, in a matter of discussion on the topic at hand, I think what staff's trying to do is the right thing, and it's, there's the spirit of the law and the letter of the law, and I think at this point, someone's trying to use the letter of the law against itself for a very narrow purpose, where what staff's trying to accomplish is comply with the spirit of the law and adjust the language to reflect that, and I think it's a wise move.
If you're in favor of the change, you would make a motion to adopt the amendment?
I would like to make a motion to adopt the amendment as written by staff.
Well, you wanted to add some language too, you could do that.
I don't think it's necessary at this time.
For the multifamily,
we can add that in.
you can add that into your motion.
Okay,
We can add it in and just.
I'd like a recommendation from the attorney on how that should be worded.
You would just add multifamily right before the word commercial, and if you wanted to put it on the Gulf of Mexico side, you would add multifamily right before non-residential uses.
Okay, I'd like to make that amendment to my motion, please.
Do we have a second? Or you should ask for a second.
Anybody second? Very nice. And Ms. Gwen, may we have a vote, please?
Yes. Commissioner Hearn? My voice is going. Commissioner Belaski?
yes.
Commissioner Rappa?
Yes.
Commissioner Clyett?
Yes.
Commissioner Wykoff?
Yes.
And Chairman Noble?
Yes.
All right.
Good job, Linda, thank you. Now on to any other planning commission discussion on anything else or old business? Reports, looks like the acting city manager is not present. City attorney, you have no report this evening?
Now, today I just wanted to say hello and introduce myself.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Good to have you here.
Thank you.
Then Planning and Zoning Department, do you have any other reports?
We just need to talk about your calendar.
Okay.
There's not that much to talk about because the charter specifies when you're supposed to be meeting. At some point, y'all had voted over the course of the last couple of years to change your meetings to the first Monday instead of the second, but there's no authorization for you to do that since it's in the charter. So we're on the first Monday this month, and we should just continue that, besides which it works out so that you don't hit any holidays when you do that until we get to November. The November meeting would have fallen on the observation for Veterans Day, so I suggest we move it back.
Second Mondays.
Second Mondays, excuse me. Yeah, that's right, you had been on the first. I'm moving it to the second Mondays because that's what the charter says you're supposed to do.
It was also 7 o'clock and we moved it to 6.
I think that you have the ability
Okay.
to pick a
That's not an
time.
issue. Okay, good.
So we're changing to second.
That's right. Next, I'm sorry about that. Except for November, which I suggest you move to the first because of the holiday. And then that gives you a full year's worth, and we backed up all the submittal times and everything. And what I'll do is I'll come back to you in October, and we'll push it forward again so that you can keep it up ahead, maybe do 18 months worth, so that people need to know ahead of time when you're going
Yes.
to be meeting, because if they are planning some kind of development, their deadlines, and when it goes to the commission, cost them lots of money as they wait if they miss deadlines. So we need it to be stable, and you all need to know too. All right.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Linda.
Yes.
Okay, I read this a while ago in the paper, because St. Pete Beach, and I remember last year Senator Kathleen Peters came and spoke to us on wireless cell phone towers, and St. Pete Beach, I was reading in the paper, they're really looking at this to be ready for when these come, so the city is ready. I mean, we can't prohibit them, but we can certainly make guidelines for where they will be coming. Are we going to address that?
I actually have looked at that because I have worked on tower legislation before and have gone up to Tallahassee to testify on the matter. So I had looked at it, and I thought that our code, given the size of the town and the impact, was fairly good, but I'll look at it again. We can bring it back, and you're always welcome to review it and see what you think the implications are. We've only had one request since I've been here, and it was to add a receiver on an existing tower. So most of them want to share tower space. It's expensive to raise another one. So that's usually what they do, but we can look at, we're going to have to look at the whole code anyway.
Because I was just wondering, because, everything's going more and more with so fast, we just
Yeah.
can't keep up with it, and we don't want something to come in
Right.
that's not visually appealing and be ready to deal with it.
Well, I will follow up, though, and read theirs and see what, it's always good to have your finger on the pulse of what everybody else is dealing with. Find out
Absolutely.
what their issues are and why they're making their changes. So I'll definitely look into that, and I'll bring it back to you and report what I find.
And then one other housekeeping issue, we've had some other members resign that were in seats. When should we vote to replace? He was second chair, Dennis Carr.
Okay. You have,
You want to put that on for next month?
sure, we
Okay.
do that next month. You'll have a new member by then. The commission is going to be appointing. Well, I guess they won't appoint until their first meeting of next month,
Right.
right?
It's going to go before the BOC.
So they'll have just
first.
appointed somebody when you get back
Right.
together next time.
Yes.
You'll have a full board again.
If we're going to meet at the second Monday, when is city commission?
They, Tuesday. And that's what, That's why I think that's why the city manager had moved yours back a week in the hopes that he could get your items on their agenda, but quite frankly, that's too quick a turnaround. It's way too fast. It requires quite a bit of effort and advertising, and what it also meant that we had to advertise a hearing on their agenda before you'd had yours, in case, not knowing what the outcome was. And so, depending on what the outcome is, we may have to do a lot more work to put the item together, and there's just no time for that. So it's not unusual that you would meet and then people would have to wait some matter of 3 weeks or better in order to get their item heard. That's not unusual.
Very good. Anyone else? Well, our next meeting is scheduled for February 5th, 2018 at 6 PM.
Actually, it's going to change. It's going to be the 12th.
Right, because of,
Oh,
Yeah,
New agenda.
this is the new one. Okay, my bad. Well, we have a meeting change for the minutes next month at least. My bad. Okay, so the next meeting is February 12th, 2018. And if anything else, this meeting is adjourned.